Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sports Page right here on the Peak One Sports Network. I'm Ashton Nick, sitting here, as always, Chris Rob. What is going on today, Rob? Chris?
Nothing much, man. How you doing? Everything all right?
Oh, man, it's another week. A lot of sports stuff going on, working multiple full-time job, multiple podcasts and shows, and
Yeah,
it's all fun. It's all fun
yeah,
stuff.
yeah. It's been hectic. I just got off of spring break, so I've been traveling and just trying to get back together because this is my first day back. So, but yeah, I'm glad to be on.
Yeah, spring break didn't seem like a real vacation for me. I took off my full-time job, but I had a lot of side projects and other work going on
Yeah,
as you do when you become an adult.
right, right. Yeah, same here.
Everybody, thank you for tuning into this episode. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media platforms. The sports page is at Sports Page Radio, and then you can follow Peak One Sports at Peak One Sports. For there's a number of various shows and podcasts you can follow. Um, but for this episode, we are going to talk about relocation. Sports franchises have relocated, kind of what has gone on with those, and what uh, kind of oddities we see with them. Um,
Yeah,
we were talking before we press record here. One that sticks out to me, it's kind of weird how they had things work out with the whole Cleveland Browns, Baltimore Ravens situation. Because clearly, if it may be different to younger adults and kids now that look at the Cleveland Browns, and the current Cleveland Browns, I guess, takes claim to the past Cleveland Browns, all the games they've won, the successes, the losses, everything from was it 1995 or something like that. When in reality, the Cleveland Browns relocated to Baltimore. But if you look, Wikipedia or however you get your information, um, the Baltimore Ravens are an expansion team. When
yeah,
in reality, the Cleveland Browns were, and that matters because back when you look at stats and records of different things back when the Cleveland Browns first started out, they were an awful team. Well, that's because they started from scratch, and the Ravens, who won the Super Bowl 3, 4 seasons in.
established. Yeah, pretty established at that point. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. They were the old Cleveland Browns team.
yeah. I actually didn't know that. I actually have a friend that's a huge Cleveland Browns fan, and he kind of wants to claim all those, before all the Ravens, new victories as opposed to, just because they relocated. Um, that's kind of iffy. I see them as two different entities, but I do understand, like, Ravens' perspective. Like, we were a new team and we won, but also understand, the Browns, we were established, and then they just basically kind of just, you know took what we built and won with that. So it's tough. It gets tricky.
Yeah, and like I said, you have my nephew who's in high school right now, who's real into sports. I wonder what he looks at and what he, because it looks weird when you look at the stats. If you don't know the whole situation, it's like the Browns just took a break for a few years and then came back, and that's why you could say, yeah, it's the same deal with the Charlotte Hornets and the New Orleans Pelicans now,
Yeah,
how that turned out, which I'm a big fan of when teams relocate and leave a city, that they have to change their name, their colors, their logo, and everything, so you can have the Cleveland Browns come back. The Seattle Supersonics are going to come back now.
yeah,
Now that's
yeah.
another situation. Look at the players. Does Gary Payton? Does Oklahoma City care anything about Gary Payton? You know, he's one of the best players in their franchise history,
Exactly.
technically.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah. Now I know the Seattle Supersonics will come back. They'll probably be part of the next expansion of the NBA, probably with Las Vegas as well. So, are they giving them that history back? Is Oklahoma City going to be looked at as a new expansion team, even though we're, gosh, I don't even know how long, 15 years from that?
Yeah,
Maybe not quite that
they
long.
started. You know, it's exactly. They came in '08. It was KD's second year in the league. Whenever they went to OKC. So that's a long. I mean, that is a long time of having a team. But because if you think about it, like um, that's what are we saying? Like that's
That,
like half of teams. Any like the Mavs have been going since what '84 or something like that. So that's
1980
a
is when
long
they
time.
expanded.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a long time.
Um, it becomes kind of a more weird situation if the Supersonics come back and they say, yeah, we're going to, I mean, it's all semantics. It's all whatever they write down. We all know what happened. We all saw what happened. It doesn't really matter who claims what. So if they bring the Supersonics back, do they claim those wins? You take those away from franchise history for the Thunder. Kevin Durant spent 1 year, like you were mentioning, it was the second year when they moved. His rookie year was in Seattle. So if they moved, or if they expanded back into Seattle, and they claim that history, would they have 1 year of Kevin Durant?
Yeah, and would they retire? Like, would they take all the retired numbers that are in OKC down because most of those numbers they all play for Seattle. So that's I'm not really
Is
sure.
that
I
is
don't
that
know too
right?
much
I didn't
about.
even look that up.
Yeah,
I will look that up real
hmm
quick. So,
because
Oklahoma City has all the Seattle SuperSonics retired numbers. I didn't even think about that. That is weird to think. Even though, I guess it's not that odd. It's just because uh, they changed they changed their name, they changed their colors, and you don't think of them as the Seattle SuperSonics anymore. Um, I guess if they would have stayed the Oklahoma City Supersonics or something and kept their likeness, it would be a little bit different.
yeah,
And yeah, I mean,
yeah.
because
So
right now it says they've won one championship in 1979.
mhm,
So they're going to effectively take away that championship. It's a little different. This is a little unprecedented when they do this because it's so long removed. The Cleveland and Baltimore situation, the Browns and the Ravens situation, that was just a few years.
yeah,
I'm not sure that they didn't have that planned when the team moved to Baltimore.
yeah. That's true. I was just looking at I've been reading this whole time, so pardon me, but it says, Nick Collison got his number retired by OKC, but in his bio it says he spent his entire career with the Seattle SuperSonics, later renamed the Thunder. So that's kind of weird. That's kind of weird.
And right now they have to. I guess right now they have to do that because there's no Seattle SuperSonics. There's no entity named that.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, just like the Washington, the Washington. I want to say the Nationals.
Commanders. Oh
Uh,
yeah,
the
yeah.
the the Senators, the Washington
Oh,
Senators.
the Senators. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They don't have a really big history either franchise. The one that moved and became the Texas Rangers, the other one that moved and became the Minnesota Twins. Neither has a big uh, had a big history. It wasn't very successful at all. So there's not a lot of uh, history that the Rangers carried over from that.
Yeah.
Uh, so it's kind of weird. But although do old players from when the Washington Nationals came from Montreal, uh, I don't remember how many years in, but they moved away from RFK to their current stadium now, and they had a lot of old Senators players come, and they were honored, and talked about old
Yeah.
time, whatever. Um,
hmm
and that's interesting. Which I guess that kind of brings you to your next point. What about players from those old teams? Do they're not going to go on, like, nobody cares. Like, I can't even name you a Washington Senators player that only played for the Senators and didn't go to the Texas Rangers. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
they don't. Texas Rangers fans don't care about that. Do you
Oh yeah.
think? Okay, let's go back to the NFL and say Houston Oilers when they moved to Tennessee. Right now, you think Earl Campbell is more likely to go to a Houston Texans game and be honored or a Tennessee Titans game? Because I don't think
I,
Tennessee cares about Earl Campbell really all that much.
yeah.
Because it's
That's a
Houston.
good point. Yeah, because he
It's
made his
Houston's
name
history.
in Houston. He's a Houston player. Um, I know Tennessee used to wear the old Oilers jerseys, like just for throwback games or things like that. But that's a good question.
Uh,
I would say just because he was such a great player that he would probably get love about the same if at both maybe
yeah.
probably more in Houston because that's where he kind of that's where his career was.
And that's where his fans were. That's where
Yeah,
people cheered them on. Once the Titans moved, I'm sure there were, or the Oilers moved and became the Titans. I'm sure there were some fans that moved on and were fans of that team, I guess. I guess that's kind of weird. I don't know if the Cowboys, I know it would never happen, but if the Cowboys were to move and relocate, if I would continue to be a fan of the team. Um, Obviously, there are a lot of Houston Texans fans that were Houston Oilers fans because it's just a Houston
the team gets
thing. Yeah.
yeah. And I know a lot of the Rams. I know a lot of St. Louis people because I went to school in Missouri. They're they still love the Rams, even though they left. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that.
And
I
the,
would think Torrey Holt will get more love in St. Louis than to go to a LA Rams game. Like it would. I think he would. It's just a thing of like playing in that city and the fans of that city loving you.
and the whole Los Angeles and Rams situation is kind of weird because obviously, um, Los Angeles isn't a huge football town. Even now they have two teams, and really outside of the Lakers and Dodgers, you can make it a point that a lot of people in LA don't support or follow the teams near as much. I don't know if there's so many teams in that area, or maybe it's a lot of people move from outside of LA. There's so many, I don't want to say immigrants because obviously they're from this country, but
Right.
transplanted people coming that they're not going to follow those teams. That's a lot of people, moving to Hollywood trying to make it. Um,
That's true. Yes. Yeah.
so
That's a good
you
point.
had the Rams, obviously we're in LA left, but there are the Rams won a Super Bowl in St. Louis. Um, in fact, the championship the Super Bowl they just won a couple of years ago was the first Super Bowl in LA for the Rams. But it's not LA's first Super Bowl because the Raiders had won, I believe, two Super
Yeah, back
Bowls.
in.
I know they won
Yeah.
three Super Bowls in that era in the 70s, 80s. I believe one was in Oakland and two were in Los Angeles. So really, the Raiders have
Yeah.
more Super Bowls than the Rams do
Yeah. Because they
in
moved in.
LA. I mean,
Yeah, they moved in '82, I believe. So I believe.
I know they have at least one there.
Yeah. 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 They have
Um,
at least one there for sure.
yeah, so LA had a Super Bowl from a different team uh, for the Rams. So now another issue with the Raiders aren't in any of the cities that they'd won Super Bowls. Now I know Las Vegas is pretty
Right.
close to LA. I know it's a California thing. There were a lot of fans in LA and in Oakland. I can't imagine how many Raider fans there already were in Las Vegas. I'm sorry, when they moved there.
They
So that's
probably
kind
had
of
quite.
weird.
They probably had quite a few.
Yeah, if you have a successful team, successful, they have three Super Bowls. The franchise does. If you
Yeah.
have a team with a few championships move to your city, do you brag about those Super Bowls? I mean, clearly you claim them. You're saying, "Hey, that's my team." If you want to be a fan of them,
Right.
but you didn't experience those Super Bowls. Like at the Cowboys in the '70s, I'm like, yeah, they won five Super Bowls, but I wasn't alive to experience the ones in the '70s. I was in the
Right.
'90s, but not in the '70s. So that's why I mean. But I've been a fan of the Cowboys for a long time. But you have a team. That's why I don't know how many Las Vegas Raiders fans there are that are have been fans of the team for more than 4 years or 5 years.
Yeah,
2020, yeah, about 4 years.
yeah, yeah. I know a lot. I know Raiders fans are, really passionate, and a lot of them didn't want them to leave. So I would assume, a lot of the original Raiders fans don't really, they probably have some sort of like disdain towards, you know, Vegas because they wanted them to stay in Oakland so bad.
Yeah.
So it's just, yeah, it's that's I don't know, it's tough.
And then if you just live in Los Angeles and you're just a Los Angeles sports fan, I guess do you claim the Raiders Super Bowls along with the St. Louis Rams and the Los Angeles? Like how many Super Bowls do you take over the ones from Oakland as
Right.
well?
Yeah.
I mean, there's 5 potential Super Bowls you can claim, or just say, hey, I'm a fan of the Rams, so that and Los Angeles in general.
They'll probably claim whoever is winning at that point, or how, they'll claim all the Super Bowls. I feel like I would too if Dallas, came from if they just relocated from somewhere like New England or something, just on like fictional. I'd probably claim those 6 Super Bowls as well. So I don't know.
So let's go the opposite direction. A team that left. You were talking about your friend kind of claims that success from the Ravens, which
Mm-hmm.
he's not far off. I can only imagine the Browns, who are one of the most passionate fans bases, at least the Cleveland Browns in general, Cleveland
Yeah,
as opposed to Cleveland's other sports. I'm uh, not so sure, but they were dedicated to their team and they did have success. I mean, now we think about the Browns, the newer Browns, they just complete dumpster fire
yeah,
since was it 1999 or 2000 when they came back. Only made the playoffs twice, as I think one playoff win. But they were going to AFC Championship games. They were in the playoffs a lot uh, in the 80s,
yeah,
and so I can only imagine how devastated a sports fan you would be as your team leaves and a few years later that team wins a Super Bowl. And there's
yeah. But
players on that team that were on the Cleveland Browns.
yeah, that's tough. That's how many years removed was that? Was they won in what 2000?
Yeah, it was 2000. I think it's always hard because the Super
2007.
Bowl is always in January. So
Yeah,
I
it's the
believe
year
it's the
after. Yeah,
2000 season, 2001 Super Bowl. Yeah,
okay.
because the
Yeah, so that's like
Titans
2 years.
and Rams were 99 to
Yeah,
2000, I believe.
yeah. So
Correct me.
technically, they
Yeah,
yeah,
correct me if I'm
yeah. So
wrong,
yeah.
listeners.
The season was 2000. So basically like 4 years or so after they suspended,
Yeah, and you
operations
didn't
over there.
have a complete turnover in roster in 4 years.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That's yeah. That would be tough. That would definitely be tough. That's like when Seattle. I guess when Seattle left, and then they went to OKC and was going to all those Western Conference Finals, and that'd be tough for me, especially since Seattle was so passionate about basketball. That was probably really tough.
Yeah. And so with that in mind, let's take it in that direction, a little more spread out than just a few years. But are there any Dallas sports fans that try to claim the Chiefs Super Bowls?
Jeez.
I mean, maybe not the most recent ones, uh, but I know they left in 1962, maybe 63 when they were the Dallas Texans and they went to Kansas City. And they won a Super Bowl. I want to say Super Bowl 4 or 5. They obviously went to Super Bowl one. So that's less, maybe right around 10 years removed, if not less, that they had won a
Yeah.
Super Bowl. And I know the Cowboys are right in that mix too, winning a Super Bowl. Uh, I think they went to Super Bowl 5 and then won Super Bowl 6, somewhere around in there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
so it wasn't like a devastating thing that your team missed out on it
Yeah.
since they won a
And
Super Bowl.
that's a long time too, as far as I personally. I mean, I'm younger, so I mean, I was born early '90s, so like I don't even think about the Chiefs being the Cowboys. So I know maybe other like older like listeners and fans probably would maybe possibly, but I think that would be a reach.
Yeah, and honestly, I believe the Chiefs were a little more, or the Texans at the time were a little more successful than the Cowboys. But the Cowboys obviously had the NFL behind them. I know the Cowboys' whole thing about wearing white at home, that was so fans would get to see the various different colored jerseys of the away teams. That was part of
Other
it.
teams, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, they would, which now you don't even think about it these days. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously, being with the NFL as opposed to Texans being the AFL, the Cowboys were playing the Giants and the Eagles and the Redskins at the time, the Commanders now, which, side note, that's kind of why they stay in the NFC East. It's a whole business thing that Tex Schramm put together. Say you want to stay in the same division because that's a New York market, that's a Philadelphia market, that's a Washington market. That's why the Cowboys grew into America's team. Not only the success they had in the 70s and early 80s was because they were in those TV markets. And that's something that helped the Texans, where the Dallas Texans had uh, the Houston market, which was pretty big, but they had the New York Jets, so I guess they did still have part of the New York market. I think they were the New York Titans at the time. I don't know when they turned into the Jets, but they kind of had all these other cities that didn't have an NFL team with their market. So it was a much newer league, obviously. That was only a few years old as opposed to the Giants, the Eagles, the Redskins, who have been around since the 20s and 30s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. I always wondered, I kind of did like a little research probably like last year, the year before. And I always wondered, I was like, why is Dallas in the AFC East? And I did some research and I'm like, oh, that makes perfect sense. That's probably why they're so global now.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a map, look at a U.S. map with where franchises are placed, and you can obviously tell that the eastern part of the United States has a lot more teams. There's less populations, less big cities in the western side. But that was even more so back in the 60s and 70s before some of these teams started, before some of these cities started getting those teams. So you had teams that were out further west play against Eastern teams because there's only so many teams that they could play. Now there's teams, 5 or 6 teams in California just for each sport.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah.
I think there was a plan to move the Cowboys into a Western or Central division when they said no. I mean, people say hey, it's just to keep the rivalries alive, which may be part of it, but you can pick you can pick the teams uh, to play every single year, even though they're outside of the division. But no, most of the time it was to do where they played,
Yeah.
the markets that they were in.
Yeah. That makes all the sense now.
Yeah, the fun fact if you didn't know. Yeah.
Right.
Well, guys, I know we're getting up against the time here, so I want to just thank everybody who was listening to us. Any more fun facts we have about relocated teams, any sport really, I know there's a lot of them out there. Be sure to comment down below or message us and mention some of them, and we can maybe do another episode on relocated teams.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah. Just let me know. Also, be able to be sure to follow us on Sports Page Radio, Two Point Sports. What's your Twitter? Your Ashton_Nicks, right?
At Ashton_Nicks. If you just search that on any social media platform, you'll find me.
Okay, and I'm CROBB15 on all platforms.
Yeah. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see our handles right there. If you're listening on however you listen to your podcasts, appreciate you listening. Yeah, definitely follow us on social media because Chris always has his power rankings of whatever. We power rank everything on here.
Right.
I know you have Major League Baseball teams coming up. Now that
Oh yeah, kind of
we've
this.
played a couple of weeks, we're seeing who's separating from the pack.
Yep.
All right, guys, thanks for listening. I'm Ashton, and that's Chris. See you
All
later.
right, see ya.